Welcome back. We're joined by Ilya Feoktistov, one of the most thoughtful and, I think, astute analysts of the jihad in America. He is today the research director of a wonderful organization in Boston, Massachusetts. It's called Americans for Peace and Tolerance, and they have done incredibly important work, in particular about jihadism being inculcated in mosques in this country, notably the Islamic Society of Boston Mosque, but also others elsewhere across the country, including in Tennessee. And we wanted to talk with Ilya about his research at a moment when federal authorities are putting out the word that they are just bemused as to what possibly could have been the motive of one Mohammed Abdulaziz, who murdered 4 American Marines yesterday in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Ilya, welcome to Secure Freedom Radio. I'm sorry that we're consulting with you on this very sad occasion, but I fear worse is to come if we don't get this sorted out, and you've been doing a terrific job at trying to help all of us sort these things. So welcome. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me on.
Talk a bit, if you would, Ilya, about some of the insights that you've gleaned over the years about what's happening in Tennessee at the moment. I understand you're a native son of Nashville, specifically from a previous act of jihad in a neighboring state, and what it tells us about what's going on in lots of places in America, not just in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Well, a lot of people don't remember this, but actually this is not the first murder of American troops on U.S. soil from Tennessee who was inspired by radical Islam. In 2009, the first al-Qaeda murder on U.S. soil since 9/11 was the murder of Private Andy Long at a Little Rock, Arkansas recruitment station. Same exact MO, same profile. The guy drives up in a car, shoots at the station, and flees. This kid, Abdul Hakim Muhammad was his name, was radicalized in Nashville, Tennessee. He was born Carlos Bledsoe, son of a African-American Memphis family, very wonderful father, and I actually went back and I looked at his father's testimony in front of Congress in 2011 at Congressman Peter King's hearings on homegrown radicalization. And what I read was a very important line in Melvin Bledsoe's testimony was, one thing is for sure, it will happen again. We've been warning about radical networks in Nashville, Tennessee, and other areas of Tennessee here for the past 4 years since we put out a film called Losing Our Sons about this murder in Little Rock, Arkansas. And unfortunately, the local and the federal authorities have not taken heed to our warnings.
You know, this is such an important data point. The film Losing Our Sons, which Americans for Peace and Tolerance produced with considerable help from you and your colleague Charles Jacobs, of course, is such a clarion call about what is happening in our own country. And it isn't lone wolves, and it certainly isn't people who are just engaged in workplace violence. These are jihadists. Talk a bit about how they are so-called radicalized and identify some of the places in which that's happening, if you would, Ilya.
You know, interestingly, I just read an article in the LA Times that offered a very interesting data point about this new shooter, Abdulaziz, and the fact that he's been very recently living in Nashville. He's from Chattanooga originally, but he's been living in Nashville. And our documentary, Losing Our Sons, the research that we did, we've identified several mosques in the Nashville area that serve as incubators of radicalism, including the Islamic Center of Nashville and the Al Farouk Mosque in Nashville. These are mosques whose imams we have on audio and videotape encouraging hatred for the United States, that the United States is the worst country on earth, that Jews and Christians should be hated, and that Muslims should strive to create Islamic states all over the world. And these are actual imams, in their own words, that we've identified from Nashville.
Now, let me just ask you, Ilya, if you have access to this information, and you've been able to draw the inevitable, certainly reasonable conclusions that these imams, these mosques are incubators of jihadism, what on earth is going on with the federal government that can't seem to see jihad, even if it's confronting it squarely in the face?
Well, as we document in the film Losing Our Sons, the federal government has, number one, forbidden FBI agents from going inside mosques and monitoring mosques from the inside because they're religious institutions, which I think is ridiculous, because mosques, unfortunately, in the United States is where a lot of this activity happens. If we're gonna prevent it, we really need to be there looking at it. Number two, the Obama administration has gutted the training manuals for the FBI and various other agencies to censor out any understanding of radical Islam. Now, I'm a Russian immigrant to Nashville. I was born in the Soviet Union. Back during the Cold War, American CIA, FBI agents studied Russian culture, studied communist writings, studied the ideology that drove our or your enemies at the time. I don't view this as anti-Russian racism, but unfortunately Obama thinks that just by studying Islamic ideology, this is somehow a bigoted effort by the law enforcement agencies and therefore must be forbidden, which is very unfortunate because the dictum, know your enemy, know yourself, 1,000 battles, 1,000 victories from Sun Tzu is still very, very irrelevant today.
It's more than just unfortunate. What is really happening here is willfully blinding our law enforcement personnel, and for that matter, as you say, other agencies of the government whose responsibility is to protect us against these kinds of threats, from understanding the threats. And it's axiomatic, as Sons has said, that you're unable to defeat an enemy you don't know. When you look at all of this, Ilya, and again, you've done tremendous work on documenting its operations, notably, in addition to Tennessee, in your now native city of Boston. When you hear that we can't figure out what the motive is, when you hear that this has nothing to do with Islam, which I'm sure we'll have explained to us shortly, if not already, when you hear that these are lone wolves and that they are acting out perhaps on the basis of something they picked up on the internet or some misguided notions about their religion of Islam, what do you think? And what should we all think and say, most especially to those who are, in fact, charged with securing us against such threats?
I think either I'm crazy or the federal government is crazy, and I think, unfortunately, it's the latter, including much of the media. I mean, it's absolutely ludicrous when I see headlines in, the LA Times today. Federal authorities see the motive behind the shooting as a mystery. It's not really a mystery. In fact, it's absolutely clear to everyone who has any sort of sense. And it absolutely drives me insane to see these kinds of things.
It may be driving you insane, but you're not crazy yet, that's for sure. The work you're doing at Americans for Peace and Tolerance is deeply appreciated by all of us. Ilya Feoktistov, keep it up and come back to us again very soon. I hope the rest of you will come back to us again on Monday. Same time, same station. Until then, this is Frank Gaffney. Thanks for listening.